Welcome back, everyone. My name is Dr. John Stewart. I'm a scientist and a biophysicist, and my colleague, Gadi Foltis, is also a student of the source field investigation, which we are covering chapter by chapter. Because this book is encyclopedic, it's very comprehensive, very thoroughly referenced scientifically, so that there's a lot of incredible body of knowledge and evidence to back up all of the scientific discoveries that have been made. Many of them behind the Iron Curtain in the 1970s and 80s. Before that knowledge became available, it filtered over to Germany, to East Germany, to West Germany, and then in the 1980s it got over to Canada and the US. So this knowledge has been around since the 1970s and even earlier. So it's about time that it became available, and David Wilcox has done a great job in making all of this evidence available to us with great references that you can read in his book. And we've finished halfway through chapter 8 of this book. It was about the power of pyramids. And the lesson to be learned was that shapes are important in the universe. The vocabulary of shapes or morphology, it seems to determine preferential pathways. For example, DNA is one of the most important shapes. It's a double helix. And it would appear that there is an imprint of that in the source field, which we call by different names, such as hyperspatial matrix, subquantum field, so that this is way deeper than quantum physics. This is subquantal, where frequencies are extremely high and phenomena pervade all of the universe in what we used to be called the ether. So the evidence in this book is all about the source field and how it interacts and how we interact with it, how we are a product of the source field. So going back to halfway through chapter 8 with regard to pyramids, and how the shape of pyramids have healing and other benefits on inorganic and organic molecules. How razor blades became sharper, how animals became healed, the different shapes of pyramids. It seemed like a taller shape, like the spiral of a cathedral, had a more powerful effect, which is why cathedrals are built the way they are with church spires, and how we hold our hands like a pyramid for prayer to create that shape that evokes a stronger connection with the source field, the Akashic dimensions. So these are shapes and symbols that we can use to enhance our ability to connect. People have found that they can make pyramids out of the most unlikely substances like PVC piping, ordinary plumbing pipe, plastic, when configured in a pyramidal shape, can have very powerful effects. So Dr. Golod on page 143 talks about how the PVC pipes were connected together and then walls created by fiberglass sheets to create a pyramid effect that had effect on healing people at a distance and locally. How crystals and solutions would crystallize more easily. There are several websites devoted to pyramid power, so if you would like to make available that. The Giza Pyramid Research Association is one website you could Google, and another one is the Pyramid of Life website. So those are two where you can check up on a lot of the detail and drill down deeper with the information. How pyramids can enhance our mental, physical, and spiritual well-being. So perhaps we should all be learning from this and finding ways in which we can incorporate such geometric patterns called sacred geometry into our life, both two-dimensional and three-dimensional. It seems that, for example, ordinary distilled water with glucose or alcohol can become a remedy when it is held inside the pyramid and has been used. This is like homeopathy. It tends to verify a lot of the findings of homeopathy, where the liquid, usually water as a vehicle, can carry information which then has a healing effect on the person or the animal. Another interesting observation about the pyramids, they seem to radiate fields of energy over many hundreds of kilometers, both up into the air and the stratosphere and around a wide area, 300 kilometers wide area around some of the pyramids. That affected an opened an ozone hole in the atmosphere. And other pyramids over polluted wells caused the wells to produce purer water. The wells were contaminated with strontium and heavy metals, and when a pyramid was built over the well, the well water became fresh and healthy again. Another pyramid was built over an oil well, and that caused the oil to become more easily pumpable from the ground. So that's on page 148. Another one, wheat grown, or the seeds stored in a pyramid grew 400% better. Diamonds synthesized within a pyramid were harder and stronger and purer. So on and on and on, there are many, many pieces of evidence showing the power of this particular shape, the pyramidal shape.
I was also going to mention that the area, that 300-kilometer area around the pyramid, was devoid of major storms and earthquakes.
That's right. Weather patterns are ameliorated in the area around the pyramids. Yeah. Another one, pyramids were built around jails in Russia, and the criminal behavior was reduced almost to zero by the presence of the pyramids in the area, lowering the crime rate. Now the question arises, is this the power only of the pyramid or of the shape, or are we a responsible component part of that system? Are we connected with the pyramid so that the pyramid is actually tapping into the intentional consciousness of the people in that vicinity?
So it's like an amplifier.
An amplifier, enhancer, focusing. We know that in radionics, for example, radionic instruments or crystals can help amplify and focus the intention of the operator in certain crystalline shapes. Quartz crystals can be better enhancers than others. Yeah. So that pretty well completes chapter 8 about the pyramids that we didn't complete last time. But before we go on to chapter 9, was there anything else, Gaddy, about shapes? Oh yeah, page 141, how special circular spherical containers made better yogurt and better beer, things like that. So please read up on that and be familiar with the power of pyramids and other shapes to enhance the quality of our lives. We're going to move on now to chapter 9, which is about fields and the source of the source field. Where does this emanate from? Where does it reside? And as I've said before, it seems that the source field, or the ether, resides primarily subquantally. In other words, in smaller dimensions, smaller than the quantum dimensions, which goes down to 10 to the minus 10 meters, which is 1 angstrom unit, around about atomic size. This is far smaller than atomic. This is sub-elementary particles around 10 to the minus 20. And from around that area would seem to be the maximum density of the Akashic fields, where you could say, well, where does God reside? Well, God resides around 10 to the minus 20, because when you go down smaller and smaller, 10 to the minus 35 is the Planck level, beyond which we think is the end, the smallest dimension in the universe. So chapter 9 is about experiments that were done mostly in Russia, but some of them verified in the West in later years. We want to talk first about the experiments done by Hans Driesch In 1891, he did work with sea urchins. And the sea urchin is an unusual animal because half of it is animal and the other half is vegetable. Has both vegetable and animal cells. And then the embryo is a hollow sphere with the vegetative cells in the bottom and the animal cells are above. And Driesch did experiments cutting the embryo into many pieces, as many as 8. And each separate piece grew a totally new, complete embryo. Even when the pieces were taken from, say, 100% vegetative parts, it still grew into a complete animal-vegetable organism, showing that here's another piece of evidence that it's not the physicality that's so important. It's the message, it's the information that's stored within those cells and within the DNA and within the electrons and the protons and the nuclei of the atoms, which store that information and able to reproduce it as it emanates morphic fields that cause form and shape. So another scientist in 1926, Gurwitch, believed that all cells receive and radiate life force. And the famous experiments he did with 2 onions, he took the onion, there's a growing part, and he pointed the growing part of the onion at another onion, and it seemed like a field, a ray or beam caused a growth or tumor on the surface of the other onion. Showing that there was some kind of field being radiated and transmitted. And to prove that even more, he put a sheet of glass between the 2 onions and it blocked the field. But then he did a piece of quartz and the field was able to pass through. Quartz passes ultraviolet light.
And infrared as well?
It also passes infrared, but I think what we're talking about here is, from subsequent reading, it's mostly the ultraviolet around 380 nanometer wavelength that is the carrier for this transmittable projected information that we'll see in subsequent chapters is something that all life forms emanate, and it's a basis of much of Reiki healing, for example. So this is all blockable by glass, but not by quartz. Also, other U.S. scientists, Burr and Robert Becker, did similar experiments mapping the electrical field of growing eggs, particularly salamander eggs, and realized that the field that they measured was actually the field of the adult organism, not of the embryo. So they were measuring and detecting the adult field that seemed to be an attractor, to use the terms of fractals, an attractor for the form to emanate and evolve from the embryo. So it was being drawn out to this predetermined pattern of the adult. And with humans, he found that these fields were particularly around the meridian points of acupuncture, so that these meridians are actual channels of subtle energy that we know is consistent with the etheric body. If you remember, there are different bodies. There's a basic physical body, the etheric body, the astral body, the mental bodies, 3 of them, and then the top body, the causal body, that is our spiritual self. But it's the etheric one that pervades into our physicality and extends outward as part of our aura. And this auric, etheric field is the one that's particularly engaged in with acupuncture. On page 160, he goes through some of the very important work of a very brave scientist in Russia, Garyaev, Peter Garyaev. Now, Garyaev studied DNA with a laser and found that DNA not only absorbs but projects and re-emits and stores light. DNA is a storehouse, an absorber and a projector. So it's like a relay station for the Akashic dimensions, for the source field. It relays, it picks up source field energy and information and re-emits it in a form, a photonic form that physical cells can then respond to. And this is reminiscent of the pineal gland, where those crystals respond to the higher dimensional source field information and energy, and then create photons that can then be seen by our inner eyes, the rods and cones inside the pineal gland. So light, Gariev feels that light is a kind of food or nourishment for cells, that we all need light, not just light, but the information that light carries, not just photons, but the photons carry higher dimensional information that has morphic significance and power to create form and shape. So light is a food for the DNA, and also for the phantom DNA, which we want to talk about a little bit. When DNA is present and is subsequently removed, there is left behind a phantom pattern that remains there for up to 30 days. And this pattern is a replica, a higher dimensional replica of the physical DNA that was present and is no longer there. And Gariev then tried to destroy that phantom by blowing liquid nitrogen on it. And for a few hours it did remove it, but then it came back as strong as ever. And he was not able to totally destroy this DNA phantom information. And it lasted for up to 30 days. And these results have been replicated in the US in 1990. So many decades have passed that many other scientists have replicated much of the information that is in this book. Also, analogously, in reincarnation, it seems that energetic duplicates of us are replicated lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And these energetic duplicates carry with us a lot of the information from past lives, including particularly wounds or injuries, gunshots, stabs that we experienced in previous lives and now show often as a scar or a defect. I remember one particular example was a child who had a hole in the heart. And when it was through hypnotic regression found that in a past life, he or she had a bullet wound in the heart then. So there's a carry forward of that morphic information that gives rise to a subsequent physical form. So another interesting phenomena that we want to talk about is the holographic nature of the human brain and animal brains. A hologram, we want to talk a little bit about hologram, because a hologram is a word that's used a lot, and many don't understand what a hologram, sometimes called a hologram. Cryon calls it a hologram. I'm a cryon enthusiast, by the way. So in these holograms, usually a coherent source of light, which is a laser, it creates a pattern that is stored on a two-dimensional sheet. And this then has the pattern of the whole picture. Any small piece is a replica of the whole object. And this is analogously in the brain. It seems that even a small part of our brain is a holographic representation of the entire brain function, including all of our memory and our intellectual capabilities. And all of this leads up to some incredible phenomena on page 164, the holographic brain, and how epileptic children who had scarring on one half of the brain surgically had that half of the brain removed, but yet functioned normally afterwards, even intact memory, personality, and sense of humor. So how could half a brain still function just as well as a whole brain? It shows that memory is not just in the hippocampus as we think, but perhaps that may be a major center, but it seems to be a distributed phenomenon that is all over the brain in a holographic sort of way.
But also, even if most of the brain matter is gone, some people, some unique people, I guess, still maintain their memory and functionality.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer, in other words. So let's just talk about that for a minute, because that is mind-boggling that some hydrocephalic or hydrocephalic people, children and adults, the hydrocephalus is where the liquid, the cerebrospinal fluid cannot escape, and it increases in pressure, and it forces the brain tissue right up against the inside of the cranial bone, up to a millimeter of thickness, just a fine, thin film of cells, and that's all there is. There's no brain there. But yet, some of these hydrocephalic people have had an IQ of greater than 100. And two found had an IQ of 126. One remarkable young man had a IQ of 126, managed to get an honors degree in mathematics at university, with only about 1 millimeter of brain tissue around the skull, inside the cranium. And it's found that many animals exhibit this same phenomenon, that they can have hydrocephalic brains and yet function apparently quite normally. So that is something to really think about. It is how necessary is our brain, and who's doing the thinking? Is the brain just another relay station for the thinking that's going on somewhere else?
In the field?
In the field. Like, is that where the thinking is happening? And our brain is just a relay station, our DNA is just a relay station to interact with the physical dimensions. You know, so that's very important material that I strongly urge you to read up more about. Okay, we move on to the work of Dr. Popp in page 168. And Dr. Popp is a very famous eminent scientist who's contributed immensely to our work with the biophotons. Dr. Popp discovered that many common carcinogenic substances absorb ultraviolet light around 380 nanometers. It's a very key frequency. 380 nanometers is in the UV, the early UV or UVA, which begins around 400. Below 400 nanometers in wavelength is violet and indigo, and then there's blue and green. So 380 is just about visible violet light. That's UVA. UVB is from about 315 to 280 nanometers. And UVC, which is the most penetrating, is around 280 to 100 nanometers in wavelength, more penetrating. And we use it for microbicidal effects, killing viruses and bacteria. The UV light has to be around 280 nanometers. But we're talking here of 380, which I can realize quite easily in my lab with lasers and LEDs, ultraviolet LEDs that are now available, and do some experiments with 380 nanometers for healing, because cancer cells respond well to 380. Cancer cells cause they cause a scrambling of the light at 380, but that 380 can also be used to unscramble the cancer cells. So this is an important area of research that I am already getting into now. With Gaddy's help, we have electrocrystal therapies now in our lab where we're using a wide variety of different colors, one for each of the chakras: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, and now ultraviolet in the 380 to 310 region. Right. Now, what cancer cells do, and carcinogens, they absorb that beneficial 380 nanometers and they change it into another wavelength, so that it's no longer, it has a detrimental, there are detrimental wavelengths, so we've got to know which are good and which are detrimental. It turns out that the 380 nanometer wavelength is healing even with very weak, low levels. In fact, sometimes we know from homeopathy that less is more. You sometimes get a more powerful effect with a weaker intensity of a field. We move on to talk about biophoton emission. Again, the work of Dr. Popp. And he did work with different plants, cucumbers and potato seeds, and primitive plants and animals emit more photons than we humans do. The photon pulses from cucumbers and potatoes are around 100 photons per second, whereas healthy humans only give off about 10 photons per second. And we give more in conditions of stress. So more is not necessarily good. And this may be from our DNA and other cells where the DNA absorb and emit light. Not just the photons, but the photons are merely carriers of that higher frequency, higher dimensional information. It's encoded all of the information of the Akashic dimensions. DNA has unique properties that have been explored by one of my favorite researchers who influenced me in my early reading, Glenn Ryan, R-E-I-N. I would strongly recommend you read a lot of his earlier work on how people's consciousness was able to change the properties of the DNA molecule. DNA forms a spiral, and it spirals around in a tight spiral, and it uncurls when it's about to divide or when it's decaying and degrading and dying, and emits more light. So DNA emitting more light is not necessarily a good thing. Cells and DNA at first absorb light, then after a delay they release intense light bursts. This is called delayed luminescence. So the DNA stores the light as a source of energy and then re-emits it. It's a form of energy and vitality for the DNA. Now, DNA is a very complex molecule. It's not only just the 4 nucleotides that form the DNA, but there are quantum locations on the DNA which are open receptors to the subquantum and quantum information that is then passed on to the more physical parts of the DNA structure. So on further now about Dr. Glenn Ryan, who has published many monographs that are worthwhile reading by themselves. He found that groups of people and individuals can wind or unwind the DNA molecule just by the power of their thought. Some people are very good at it. He did his measurements around 260 nanometers, which is deeper into the ultraviolet. If you remember, it's around the ultraviolet UVB. So some people are particularly skillful at interacting with the DNA, causing it to uncurl and curl one way or the other. And it results even up to 10% change, especially with the more proficient individuals. Contrasting that, there was one angry, incoherent person he tells us about who caused a change, who caused a tightening of the DNA molecule at around 310 nanometers. So he says that there could be a connection, we know this already, connection between anger and cancer, particularly bowel cancer. I personally know quite a few people who have had bowel cancer, I think primarily because of the anger that they held within themselves. It comes out in that particular organ. Each organ, its pathology manifests the unique kind of psychology that is prevailing at that time. So,
talking about bowel cancer, it is probably a good time for us to take a short commercial break.
Very good, yes. All right, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye. My name is John Stewart, President of Biophysica, Inc., and a biomedical engineer. We make the world's most advanced colloidal generators for domestic and industrial quantities of mineralized waters. Many bottling plants worldwide use our generators to make colloidal silver, the world's most life-saving antimicrobial supplement, as well as colloidal zinc, gold, magnesium, copper, iron, etc. Biophysica advanced generators produce the smallest nanomolecules to ensure potency against the smallest, most vicious viruses. A Biophysica colloidal generator will give your family the best quality colloidal silver for many years, quickly, cheaply, and easily. Contact us at biophysica.com or call us at 416-636-5804. So welcome back. We were talking about Dr. Glenn Ryan and his work with individuals and groups who were able to curl and uncurl the DNA molecule simply by the effect of their consciousness. And Glenn Ryan detected that change by radiating the UV with 260 nanometer ultraviolet light, and found that that was the optimal wavelength wherein DNA absorbs and re-emits light. So he was able to scan and see how there was a change throughout that part of the spectrum as the DNA changed. So he was able to make a physical measurement as a change based on the consciousness of certain individuals who were better at it than others. Also, he found that those individuals who were good at it would only get a result if they had a conscious intention to do so. There was no change if they didn't have that conscious intention. So the conscious intent is like the signal riding on the carrier wave of their consciousness.
So just so I understand, this is affecting, through their intent, affecting somebody else's DNA.
That's right. The DNA would have been from another source, not their own DNA. But of course, I'm sure we can all affect our own DNA, but this was extraneous DNA in a test tube, in a laboratory measurement, showing changes as that DNA changed its responsiveness. Yeah.
And even at a distance? Large distance?
Thank you. That's a good point. Yes. This was, they even replicated it between someone in Moscow and someone in California, and over many thousands of miles of distance, they were still able to get that effect, provided the transmitter had the intention to do so. And it required not just intention, but it required something else. It required what he called a heart focus, a focus from the heart center. Now, and he called that a love energy. So this is part of the definition of love. Part of the definition of love here is coherence, organization, structure, order, affinity, and attraction. So all of that is part of this love phenomenon. And if any of you are interested to enhance your cardiac capability, your love-enhancing capability to influence reality, then I would suggest you go onto the heartmath.com website and buy their software program where you can, through biofeedback, teach yourself to become more proficient as a coherent transmitter and receiver of higher dimensional energy. And at heartmath.com. So another definition, what is coherence? We talk a lot about cohering and coherence. Coherence can be in time and space. Coherence means two things happening in alignment with each other in time and in space. Like the two front wheels of a car, they have to be aligned with each other in time and space. So that's called coherence physically. A laser beam is coherent because all of the wave fronts, the vibrations and the waves are happening at the same time and in the same space, whereas other light sources, ordinary incandescent light and light from the sun or from the stars, are not coherent. And it would seem, as we see later in this chapter, that it's laser light having that coherence that seems to be a better carrier of information. And I've used a lot of this laser light as a carrier in a lot of my own research work and in my inventions for healing, particularly electrocrystal healing.
So would you say that health and vitality are the manifestation of coherence, or the result of coherence, and maybe disease is the result of incoherence?
It would certainly seem so, that incoherence, cancer cells are typically incoherent. They don't have that time-space synchronization that is observed in healthy cells. So that's one of the things. We want to get back to coherence. Coherence means structure and order. I don't know to what extent you have too much structure in order is not a good thing, I would suspect. So too much structure. So it's like, as the Buddhists would say, middle path. Pursue a middle path. Don't go to either extremes. Yeah. On page 173, we talk about cycles and biorhythms. Body light emanations occur in waves and rhythms of certain time intervals of 7 days, 14 days, 32 days, 80 days, and 270 days. And these have been verified by Japanese scientists as well as Russian scientists. And they found that the human body emits light, emits biophotons, particularly from the face and other organs besides the face. So we wonder if certain organs, for example, at the palm of the hand, other scientists have found the palm of the hand particularly emits biophotons. So when we shake hands with each other, we are sharing biophotons through a very important portal, namely the hand. And Reiki is a hands-on healing touch. And then the lips are an important part of our interaction of kissing. The mother-child or lover interaction is a very important organ, perhaps of biophoton. And the genitals, perhaps too, in tantric practices, could be very important areas of biophotonic release and reception, where we communicate our informational patterns, our love patterns to each other.
What about the Kundalini experience?
Kundalini is somewhat different. It's enclosed within the columns of the vertebra, the Ida and Pingala, the columns that have a caduceus type of effect as the Kundalini rises from the sacral chakra up.
I'm wondering if the Kundalini would be some form of light, and it reaches the pineal gland, it causes some kind of a light explosion.
That's right. Yeah, the Kundalini, as it eventually when it hits the pineal, you see the light. There are light flashes when that energy rises up in an individual whose chakras are open. And Muktananda, for example, reported seeing the blue light, flashes of blue light as his pineal became open. So it could well be that it's a form of energy that can be transmuted into photons. You know. Or again, relay stations. I think that we have to think in terms of relay. Every cell is a relay from the higher dimensions to lower and lower and lower and lower dimensions till we get right down to physicality. As below, so above. So we talked about the cycles and the facial and other emanations. Cancer patients lose their biorhythms, so there's a lack of structure with cancer patients, and their light is less coherent. So there's one way of diagnosing cancer at a very early stage, is to do some biophotonic measurements of the coherence of the light, and then re-emitting coherent light to that individual to try to bring them into a more healthy, coherent state. Light being a very important carrier of healing energy and information. Now, paradoxically, he talks about the multiple sclerosis being a condition where the patients absorb too much light. So here we have to have a balance of too much versus too little. MS patients could be becoming overwhelmed by light, maybe of the wrong kind, that's carrying the wrong kind of information. Moving on to talk further about Dr. Popp and his biophoton experiments. He found that he did a lot of experiments with chicken eggs and found that free-range chickens had a more coherent light than factory egg chickens. They were healthier then. They absorbed a healthier and emitted a healthier biophotonic energy. The healthiest foods he measured had more coherent, although a lesser intensity. So lesser is often better than more. So here again, quality rather than quantity. So these higher quality foods have a more coherent light. So I should invent a coherence detector so you can go around the food stores looking and measuring the coherence of the food you buy. Yep.
How did he measure the coherence?
That I don't know. We have to look into that and see, is it, say, pure oscillations? Was he picking up the photons using some kind of photomultiplier tube and then looking to see if the frequencies are pure or if it's scattered across a white noise spectrum, for example?
Wouldn't coherence require two elements, measuring one against the other?
No, not necessarily. There could be self-coherence with its, like a pure sine waves or pure frequencies would be coherent in time, and then in space they would be over the whole surface. Spatially, they could be coherent. So that's maybe the sort of things we have to look for. I think this is, some of you ought to read this up and study it and get back to us and let us know, and we will form a research team to look into this, because all of this, it's about time that it was used creatively for the benefit of humanity. And also young scientists growing up should become more aware, and that be the future biophotonic scientists of the next generation. Okay, he also did work with fleas, particular kind of flea called a Daphnia. These fleas emit and absorb light with each other, like fireflies. They communicate light to each other. The firefly is so outstanding because we don't need a biophotonic detector. At night you can see fireflies from a great distance. They're biophotonically communicating with each other, as we are all doing, except we're unaware of it. Also, small fish do that with light. There are many light-emitting fish, and algae, and also every fish has an electric field that they communicate with each other. And there are fish that even have a high voltage that can stun the prey. So the electrical energy, light energy, and vibrational energy, all part of biology.
So that's the eel?
The electric eel, yeah, is a powerful fish that can paralyze its prey with many hundreds of volt pulses.
Do we know how it produces this amazing charge?
Yeah, I've actually studied this many years ago in my PhD program back at the University of Toronto. I had a particular interest. The cells of the torpedo fish and the eel are arranged one on the other, thousands of them like a battery, and they're all charged in parallel as they're fed, and then they're discharged in series so that you get like a few millivolts adding onto each other 1,000 times, and then pulsed at they have to be pulsed at a certain repetition frequency to create a spasmodic contraction of the prey, to put their muscles into contraction. It's got to be pulsatile at the ideal frequencies, yeah. Okay, finally with Popp, he did work with plants and extracts to see which plants and extracts would help cancer. And this is an important reference here. Please look it up, page 174, because it's very, very relevant for cancer patients. He found that many of the so-called healing herbs and extracts made the cancer worse, except one, and that was mistletoe. So that's on page 174. Please make particular note of the power of mistletoe. I know several cancer patients who are now on mistletoe extract, and maybe we should all be taking it, because we all have cancer cells floating in our bodies all the time. We should be taking not only mistletoe but colloidal silver nanoparticles, which are also been shown to neutralize and inactivate cancer cells, both of which are totally innocuous, harmless substances. So please take note of that. Moving on now to page 175, the phantom leaf effect. This work was done, that we remember, way back in the 70s. 1975, this work was done. Adamenko, using Kirlian photography, found that when they cut, they had a leaf and then they cut a part of the leaf, there was still a phantom shape remaining behind. Now, back then in the 1970s, we are all too skeptical to believe this. We dismissed it because it was too absurd and preposterous to believe that anything like this was possible. But now all these decades later, it's been replicated over and over again. So it's a no-brainer now. We can still not believe it, but still it works. And let's use things that are where there's enough evidence that we have to incorporate it into our belief systems. Yeah.
Sorry, can I ask you how long did that phantom light stay?
Well, we know that the DNA phantom lasts at 30 days. I don't recall exactly the leaf one, but certainly quite a bit of time. It has a lasting residual effect. But begs the question: what is the nature of reality here? Yeah, if the physical leaf is gone, the physical DNA is gone, but we have this phantom. Is that the reality or not? Yeah.
Would the phantom would it have preceded the physical?
It's like the chicken and the egg, that the phantom come first. I think it's fairly clear that it is the phantom is the true nature of reality is not what we see here and what we feel and of our tissues and their physicality is merely a projection of multiple levels of relays from higher dimensional domains and the matrices, the matrix of subquantum reality.
Yeah, as we progress through these chapters, especially this chapter here, this seems to be my conclusion.
Inevitably, we have to come to that conclusion, and it's a great experience for me personally to read this because it's consolidating my suspicions that a lot of this is in fact the true nature of reality, and we should really engage that level of reality to make the physical changes in disease and illness and protection that we need for our wellness and our survival, including the survival of our society. So again, another well-known Russian scientist, Kazhnachayev, in around the 70s, he had two sealed cell cultures. One of them was infected by a virus, and the other was a healthy, both of them sealed and separately. And he found that the infected tube was able to radiate the disease, the viral information to the healthy cell culture. And that the healthy cell culture developed the same infection as the infected one after a length of time. The healthy culture developed the DNA of the virus, even though they were physically separated. And again, he did the same experiment that was done by Daryaev, yeah, the glass versus the quartz, finding that glass stopped the rays, but quartz allowed it to pass through, showing that it was primarily an ultravioletly carried phenomenon, probably around 380 nanometers. Now, subsequent work suggests that laser light, as I said, being a coherent source of light is a better carrier for some of this information, particularly for healing. If we want to be healing tumors and cells, we should be using laser light as the carrier to take energy and information from a healed source to an unhealed source. Now, back to Garyaev. Garyaev shone laser through healthy seeds onto dead seeds and found that the healthy information that riding on the laser beam was able to awaken the dead seeds. And these dead seeds were from Chernobyl that had been killed by radioactivity. And these dead, radioactively damaged seeds recovered totally by being irradiated with the laser beam, carrying the healthy information. So that has implications for animal and human well-being. The second experiment he did with lab rats, where he damaged their pancreas. Lab rats would die within 5 days of acute diabetes, but he shone a laser light reflected from an excised healthy pancreas that he got post-mortem, not from the living, not within a living organism, but just a pancreas. And he shone the laser light on it, reflected on to the animal that had the damaged or removed pancreas, and found that the damaged rat, 95% of them recovered fully, whereas those who were not healed died.
So do we know, this sounds like a phenomenal form of medicine here.
This is a phenomenal form of healing, just having an information pattern writing on a laser beam. Now, this isn't just fantasy. 3 other groups have subsequently confirmed these effects, and even bizarrely, they've even confirmed it over distances of about 20 kilometers through distant healing, which we call radionics. And radionics is an area that I have a special interest and expertise in. I've invented radionics instruments for many years, but reading this book is giving me a basis for a lot of the work that I had been doing, not fully realizing the power and the implications of it. The third experiments, this was done in 2005, the anti-aging benefits on animals and humans. Anti-aging benefits, and one adult woman grew new teeth when he used a red laser to carry the information from a healthy teeth to the woman who had the adult woman who had missing teeth, and through 3 new adult teeth grew in. This is quite phenomenal. And at page 177. David Baxter calls it a wide spectrum red laser. So that's actually a contradiction in terms because a laser is actually a pure
single frequency,
highly pure single frequency. I think what he's referring to here is an LED, an intense light emitting diode that is coherent temporally, but spatially no. So perhaps an LED does have a bit of a broad spectrum. Say around 630 nanometers might be a typical red LED. So perhaps it is important to have that little bit of a spread in the color, but the temporal coherence is still present in an LED. So we'll do that when we get home.
So it's not the light itself, it's the information contained within the light.
Exactly. So just shining a laser is not going to do very much unless you impart upon the laser your information. It's just like a TV signal. The TV transmitter will transmit energy, but you have to have a picture writing on the energy, otherwise there's no picture.
So that's what we call a carrier wave?
Carrier wave, yeah.
Modulating a modulator.
Yeah, there's a modulation of the carrier, and that modulation is then the signal that it causes the change. Like reading listening to music on an MP3, it's the music we want, not the carrier.
So what if I was able to record a light picture of myself when I'm perfectly healthy?
Exactly. In fact, from what we're reading here, it would be wise to get a hologram or a hologram of yourself.
Hologram, yeah.
A hologram of yourself, and use that, because the hologram is a laser-based image, and that probably has properties that are far more powerful.
So I could do like a restore.
Although pictures have been, radionic practitioners have used pictures, they have used hair samples. So there's a lot of flexibility. We only have about 2 minutes left, so I just want to finish up and wrap up with Dr. Garyaev and tell you in page 178 how, in spite of his important work, his university fired him in Moscow. His Moscow university fired him. We don't know why. Garyaev has a website. I was on it this afternoon, checking. Look up Garyaev's website. It's mentioned in the book here by, I forget, bioenergetic, wavegenetic.ru, W-A-V-E, genetic, G-E-N-E-T-I-C. And we got onto it very, very easily. And all of his literature, although it's not much more advanced than what you'll find in this book here. However, what he's doing now, I'm not sure. I know he has been in Toronto and has been around the world, But here is an example of the kind of oppression and suppression that we have to live with in spite of all of this great work. But we will overcome it all, and we will learn the power of the source field to use in our everyday life for the good of all, human and non-human. So we'll just fill in the last minute or two about the Raspberry project of Dr. Budakovsky, the holographic image again, using a red laser, the image of a healthy raspberry, and projected that holographic image onto the callus or tumor of another raspberry. It had to be the same species, and found that tumor disappeared, which reminds me of that the famous Asian the tumor, disappearing tumor on the bladder cancer.
Yeah.
It's too bad we don't have that, but next time we'll perhaps play it. The one that Greg Braden brought to our attention.
Absolutely.
Where the three healers stood around the patient, and within 20 minutes, half an hour, you could see on the ultrasonogram the tumor shrinking.
It actually took less than 5 minutes
yeah.
for a cancerous tumor to shrink and disappear.
You could see it disappearing in the ultrasonogram in the bladder, the cancer bladder. So that was the power of intention and consciousness on physical cells. So I think we're pretty well finished now. Thank you very much. See you in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you.
My name is John Stewart, President of Biophysica, Inc., and a biomedical engineer. We make the world's most advanced colloidal generators for domestic and industrial quantities of mineralized waters. Many bottling plants worldwide use our generators to make colloidal silver, the world's most life-saving antimicrobial supplement, as well as colloidal zinc, gold, magnesium, copper, iron, etc. Biophysica advanced generators produce the smallest nanomolecules to ensure potency against the smallest, most vicious viruses. A Biophysica colloidal generator will give your family the best quality colloidal silver for many years, quickly, cheaply, and easily. Contact us at biophysica.com or call us at 416-636-5804. My name is John Stewart, President of Biophysica, Inc., and a biomedical engineer. We make the world's most advanced colloidal generators for domestic and industrial quantities of mineralized waters. Many bottling plants worldwide use our generators to make colloidal silver, the world's most life-saving antimicrobial supplement, as well as colloidal zinc, gold, magnesium, copper, iron, etc. Biophysica advanced generators produce the smallest nanomolecules to ensure potency against the smallest, most vicious viruses. A Biophysica colloidal generator will give your family the best quality colloidal silver for many years, quickly, cheaply, and easily. Contact us at biophysica.com or call us at 416-636-5804. My name is John Stewart, President of Biophysica, Inc., and a biomedical engineer. We make the world's most advanced colloidal generators for domestic and industrial quantities of mineralized waters. Many bottling plants worldwide use our generators to make colloidal silver, the world's most life-saving antimicrobial supplement, as well as colloidal zinc, gold, magnesium, copper, iron, etc. Biophysica advanced generators produce the smallest nanomolecules to ensure potency against the smallest, most vicious viruses. A Biophysica colloidal generator will give your family the best quality colloidal silver for many years, quickly, cheaply, and easily. Contact us at biophysica.com or call us at 416-636-5804. My name is John Stewart, President of Biophysica, Inc., and a biomedical engineer. We make the world's most advanced colloidal generators for domestic and industrial quantities of mineralized waters. Many bottling plants worldwide use our generators to make colloidal silver, the world's most life-saving antimicrobial supplement, as well as colloidal zinc, gold, magnesium, copper, iron, etc. Biophysica advanced generators produce the smallest nanomolecules to ensure potency against the smallest, most vicious viruses. A Biophysica colloidal generator will give your family the best quality colloidal silver for many years, quickly, cheaply, and easily. Contact us at biophysica.com or call us at 416-636-5804.